Donald Trump went after the media in his first press conference in 6 months. So let's watch. He's going to get into it with a CNN host here, and then we'll come back and discuss.
Any information that turned out to be so false and fake out. I think it's a disgrace. And I say that, and that's something that Nazi Germany would have done and did do. I think it's a disgrace. That information that was false and fake and never happened got released to the public. As far as Buzzfeed, which is a failing pile of garbage, writing it, I think they're going to suffer the consequences. They already are. And as far as CNN going out of their way to build it up, and by the way, we just found out I was coming down. Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen is a very talented lawyer. He's a good lawyer in my firm. It was just reported that it wasn't this Michael Cohen they were talking about. So all night long, it's Michael Cohen. I said, I want to see your passport. He brings his passport to my office. I say, hey, wait a minute. He didn't leave the country. He wasn't out of the country. They had Michael Cohen of the Trump Organization was in Prague. It turned out to be a different Michael Cohen. It's a disgrace what took place. It's a disgrace. And I think they ought to apologize to start with Michael Cohen.
Since you're attacking us, can you give us a question? Mr. President-elect.
Go ahead.
Mr. President-elect, since you are attacking our news organization, can you give us a chance?
Your organization
You are attacking our news organization. Can you give us a chance to ask a question, sir?
Go ahead.
Sir, can you state, Mr. President-elect,
go ahead.
Can you state
She's asking a
categorically,
question.
Mr.
Don't be rude.
President-elect, can you give us a question?
Don't be rude.
You're attacking us. Can you give us a question?
Don't be rude.
Can you give us a question?
I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
Sir,
go ahead.
Can you state categorically that nobody... No, Mr. President-elect, that's not appropriate.
So there's a lot to break down here and a lot to talk about. We just did the segment, but to run through it real quick. What Trump is so angry about and what he's referring to is a story that was CNN ran with, and it blew up online, especially on Twitter, and then BuzzFeed, ran the ball into the end zone. But there is a paid former GOP anti-Trump operative, and then paid by the Democrats against Trump, guy who also was former British intelligence, who shopped a story around to different outlets who said, hey, I have this explosive report on Trump with all this information. And in the report was really nonsensical claims that he provided no evidence for. Like, for example, the big one being, Russia has a tape of hookers pissing on Trump. So this happened months ago, and nobody ran with the story because the guy seemed to be not credible and he was fucking paid by the opposition. Well, fast forward to today, and there were some people in our intelligence agencies, in the CIA, people who've demonstrated themselves to be anti-Trump. Now, there are other aspects of the deep state that are anti-Hillary, but in this case, they were anti-Trump, and they said, yeah, let us shop it around and say that this is totally real and this guy's trustworthy. So they did that. Then CNN goes on air, and they run with this story of, and they don't give any of the specifics because they know it's unverified, and they say it. So they go, the U.S. intelligence agencies are now saying that Donald Trump is compromised by Russia. And they run with that as a breaking news story for a couple hours. Donald Trump is compromised by Russia, says U.S. intelligence agencies. Now, we can't tell you why, and we can't give you the information behind it because it's not verified. So they don't bring up the videotape of hookers allegedly pissing on him because they know it might be bullshit and there's zero evidence for it. So they cover their tracks by saying, well, we didn't discuss that part. But they are running with the core of the story, which is Trump is compromised by Russia. So Trump is mad because they ran with that story based on nothing. And Jake Tapper, by the way, after this press conference, they came back to him, and Jake Tapper was all angry, and he's like, Mr. Trump, you're lying. We never, said what was in that report. Yeah, but Jake, how do you present the conclusion of said report, but you don't give the evidence that led to such conclusion? So in other words, you presented step 2, but you didn't bring up step 1 because you said step 1 is unverified. Well, if step 1 is unverified, the actual stuff that's in the report, Well, then how can you say step 2 is true? You can't, but you did. But everybody on CNN ran with that. Now, Buzzfeed, they were like, fuck it, we'll publish the whole report. So they did publish the report. And then everybody who looked at the report, who's not a partisan hack, went, this looks like garbage. Why? Because there's no sourcing, no details, there's misspellings in the report, and there's basic geographical mistakes. As well as, like Trump actually was right, laying it out there. They said, oh, Trump's lawyer went to Prague and, had a meeting with the Russians or something. And they go and they look at that, they talk to that guy. He's like, I've never been to Prague in my life. Go ahead, you can check my records. And everybody's like, oh yeah, that appears to be true. So in other words, this shocker, this guy who was paid, a former British intelligence agent who was paid to do opposition research on Trump by first Republicans, then by Democrats, with a report that sounds preposterous. It turns out that report is probably preposterous. So now Trump is rightly mad that, come on, man, like, what the fuck? What the fuck? You guys ran with that? And so he's now taking it out on CNN and going, fake news, fake news, fake news. So on the one hand, in terms of that report, in my mind, there's no evidence to prove. If the tape exists and it leaks, then I'll believe it. But if you're not going to give me hard evidence, why the fuck would I believe it when the story is super, super sketchy? So, and this is not me saying I like Trump. I fucking despise Trump, but that doesn't mean every anti-Trump argument is accurate. And then also, just like we brought up before, which is it, Democrats? So Democrats make two claims simultaneously. One is Trump and Putin are best friends and they're working together and they love each other. And now the other claim is Trump and Putin hate each other and Putin is blackmailing Trump and Trump is his puppet. Which is it? Do they love each other? Do they hate each other and one's blackmailing the other? Which is it? It can't be both. You have to pick one. But they don't care. At this point, anything that's anti-Trump, okay, let's latch onto it and go with it. So Trump, I think, is justified in his anger over this. But now the other angle of it, which is another really, really concerning angle, is, yes, he is setting a horrible precedent by basically telling CNN, no, I'm not going to let you talk. You're not going to ask me a question, and that's my decision, and that's the end of the conversation. Well, whoa. Now, hold on now, big guy. You're the president-elect now. So you're not just campaigning. Now, when you were campaigning, I'm of the belief that even in your campaign, you should be forced to abide by the First Amendment as if you are the government already. So in other words, he had a media blacklist because people asked him tough questions and he didn't like those outlets. He's like, oh, I'm going to put you on the blacklist and you can't ask me anything. I'm not even going to let you in my event. He would let in white nationalist radio hosts, but he wouldn't let in like legitimate political outlets. Ones that are good, ones that are bad. He banned so many people. National Review, a conservative outlet he doesn't like, banned. Washington Post, banned. Politico, banned. So he should have allowed them in then to ask him questions. But now that you're president-elect, it's not a choice, dipshit. You got to answer the questions. Even if they're wrong, even if they're saying things where I agree with you and I actually think you're right and the claims are bogus, you have to field those questions. Now you are a representative of the government of the United States of America. And for you to shut out people who are the media, well, then that would be you basically saying the First Amendment doesn't really apply when it comes to me, and I'm not going to answer whoever, I don't want to answer. Well, no, now you are president. Now you are the leader of this country. You are a representative of the government, so you don't have a choice. Now it's, there's a free press, so you have to respond to them. You can't, bunker yourself in a hole and say, I'm never going to answer any questions. Because then that's a fundamental breakdown of freedom of the press and transparency in government, and that's not okay. So yeah, he's setting a horrible precedent by saying, I'm not going to answer your question, you're fake news, and you're done. A lot of people are happy because they're like, oh, well, he's right on the substance of it, so, he's justified in doing this. Could you imagine Obama did that? Can you imagine Obama said to anybody, Fox News, anybody, no, I'm not going to answer your question, I'm never going to answer your question, you're fake news, move along. People would say, oh, a violation of the First Amendment to the highest order. You can't do that. You have to answer. This is a free press. You don't believe in a free press. You're an authoritarian. And guess what? If they said that, they would have been right. And now Trump's doing it. And again, the people who are saying this is authoritarian are right. Even though I don't agree with the media in this front, you got to answer the question. So that's not okay. So there are multiple angles to this. The angle of, yes, CNN, you shouldn't have run with that story because there's no evidence for it and it's not true. So I'm not saying you should be locked up for running the story or you shouldn't have the freedom to run whatever story you want. No. Of course you have the freedom to run whatever fucking story you please. But you should be smart enough to vet it enough and to care about evidence enough to not present things that are unverifiable and unsourced and seemingly ridiculous. So, yeah, you shouldn't run that story. In the same way you shouldn't have run, for example, now obviously this is a much more serious situation, so it's different, but in terms of the lack of evidence, there's an argument to be made here. You shouldn't run, Saddam did 9/11 or Saddam had weapons of mass destruction. They ran with that for so long, and then it affected the public perception of it. Well, you're going to affect the public perception. Trump is compromised by Russia. Trump is compromised by Russia. But what you're basing it on is garbage. So what do you mean? So you should vet and you shouldn't do the story. But on top of that, yes, Donald Trump, you need to understand you can no longer, this is a guy who sued Bill Maher over a joke. He's a guy who threatened to sue The Onion over a satire article. He's a guy who created a media blacklist. He's a guy who said he wants U.S. laws on free speech and free press to mirror England, so not our own. We're much more permissive, and we believe much more in freedom of speech than they do. They have all kinds. It's much easier to do a case of libel or slander, or do a case of hate speech, for example, over there. He wants to tighten up our regulation on speech and the press. So on that angle, Trump is dead wrong because he's going to want, if you do anything I don't like, that's it for you. He also said in this, Buzzfeed is going to, quote, suffer the consequences. What does that mean? What does that mean? What are you saying? Are you saying that, you're going to go on a witch hunt against them and you're going to, I don't know, maybe try to use the IRS and audit them out of existence or find a way to use the government, the NSA, and spy on them and figure out dirt on, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You're going to do something that's against the free press, most likely. So that's not okay. So Trump is wrong because he's massively authoritarian. But also the media is wrong because you shouldn't have ran with this story because it's totally unverified and you should know enough to not, go with what is likely fake news. So it's a little bit of a nuanced picture here, but I hope I'm coming across crystal clear as to what should have happened in both cases. So Trump can't do this authoritarian garbage anymore with shouting down reporters, and you're the president now. You got to let them ask the questions, and you got to answer the fucking questions, because that's the way this game is played. This is the United States of America. But then on the other hand, also the media, look, they were wrong to run, even the way CNN ran it, where they tried to cover their tracks by saying, we're not going to say the part about the hookers pissing on him, but we're going to say he's compromised by Russia. Well, in order for that part to be true, the first part has to be true. The claims in the report have to be true, and there's no evidence of that, and the report appears to be bogus because of misspellings and geographical mistakes and basic factual errors, like with Trump's lawyer. So it's a little bit of a mixed picture, but I hope I'm coming across clear and giving you what my breakdown of it is.